Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Joe. Surrogates is a movie about a society that stay in the safety of their home and interact with the world through the use of robots, or surrogates. It stars Bruce Willis, Rosamund Pike, Radha and Ving Rhames. It was directed by Jonathan Mostow and released in 2009. The idea for the story sounds interesting, but does it translate well into a movie? Well, let's talk about it. The movie is set in the near future, where everyone stays isolated in their homes and experience all life has to offer through the use of surrogates. Since the operators are safe, they can try whatever adventure their hearts desire because the operators come to no harm if the surrogates are damaged or destroyed. As a result of this, 98% of the world's population is plugged in, and crime is practically non-existent. This all changes when a non-registered surrogate is attacked at a nightclub. FBI agents Tom Greer and Jennifer Peters are called to the scene to investigate because of the unregistered surrogate. They discover that the attack on the surrogate resulted in the death of the operator, and now for the first time in quite some time, they have a homicide on their hands. The victim is the son of the inventor of surrogates, Dr. Lionel Cantor, played by James Cromwell. And yeah, no kidding. What life-altering technology has he invented in movies at this point? Let's recap, shall we? He invented the warp drive. He invented the NS series robot. He invented surrogates. He had a hand in inventing the dinosaurs, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's a deleted scene somewhere in 10,000 BC where he's held up in a hut, whittling away at a piece of wood. This will change everything. I call it the spoon. Anyway, there are people who refuse to adopt the use of surrogates. They live on reservations in the major cities around the world. They're called the Dreads and led by the Prophet, Ving Rhames' character. As the investigation deepens, Tom Greer engages a suspect with a weapon that not only shorts out the surrogate but liquefies the human brain of the user. Through a near miss, Tom's surrogate is destroyed, and he's forced to continue his investigation in the flesh. The script for this movie is okay, but it's not great. They try and make up for it with a lot of flashy action scenes, and there is a plot twist that you can see coming from a mile away. But there are just too many things wrong with this movie to make it believable. What I did like about this movie, the acting and the dialogue for this movie are fine. I have no real issues with it. And I like the fact that the surrogates look and act almost human, but not quite. It really gives me a sense of uncanny valley, and I think they did that well. Come to think about it, this would probably be a bad actor's dream job. You just be you, buddy, you'll be fine. And it's quite a stark contrast when you see Bruce in his human form. So here are my top issues with this movie. The story is set in the near future where everyone uses surrogates. But outside of the surrogates, everything else in this movie seems to be right out of 2009, from the cars to the buildings. In iRobot, which this movie reminded me a lot of, not only did you have the NS series robot, but everything in the environment felt futuristic. From the timeline, 14 years from the current day, they began developing the technology to enable those with disabilities to have a fuller life. As the technology evolved, aspects of it started to filter into military applications. Not long after that, Congress approves the use of surrogates by the general public, and within 7 years, 98% of the world's population adopted the use of surrogates. So my big issues here is, this is too radical a technology to ever be adopted so fast. And when you think about developing nations, how would they have the infrastructure in place to support this? How expensive are these robots that 98% of the population could afford to buy one? They don't look cheap. And this is my issue here. If this was set further into the future, yes, I could buy it. But because everything looks to be around 2009, it just doesn't fit. The reservations that the Dreads live on are old, run-down buildings. And why is that? You don't like surrogates, so f*** you. You don't get running water or power? It's only been 7 years. They should have had areas of the city where surrogates weren't allowed to go. The idea of reservations doesn't feel right. It doesn't quite work for me. So we get a scene where an FBI administrator is in a room monitoring the transmissions of the surrogates. He informs us that he can monitor any surrogate at any time, anywhere in the world. Is that not an invasion of privacy? What are the privacy laws like now? There's a scene where there's an incident that happens where two surrogates are beaten up on a human, and crime is almost never a thing. He orders a warrant and gets one almost immediately and shuts down the surrogates to prevent the crime. And who is this person? Why does he have so much power? I know you can argue that this movie is somewhat dystopian, but this is downright Orwellian. Through the FBI's investigations, they discovered that the weapon was being developed for the military. And they canceled the project because they realized that the weapon system was not only destroying the surrogates, but killing the operators, and they didn't want to risk it being used against their own troops. Like, bombs can't? Rifles can't? I'm sorry to say, friendly fire is a thing. And you mean to tell me that you wouldn't want a weapon system that could not only disable enemy troops, but wipe out their operators, preventing them from bringing in reinforcements? It just doesn't make sense. There is a scene where the military is invading the reservations, and I got a real kick out of it because it looked like it was right out of an FPS. The biggest problem with this movie is right at the end. Tom, longing for an intimate relationship with his wife, and not her avatar, saves the world's population, but opts to allow all the surrogates to be destroyed. Now, you're talking about a world's population who spent most of their waking hours in an interface bed. Their bodies are probably emaciated through neglect or terribly obese, not to mention the atrophy that would set in. So you're going to force 7+ billion people out into the world for the first time in 7 years. Everything would fall apart overnight. You would be looking at a mass die-off of the world's population, not to mention all the suicides. I think if you were to do a sequel of this movie, it would look a lot like Mad Max. Like I said earlier, this is an idea that I'm sure sounded good on paper, and it's an interesting concept. But a lot of creative writing would be needed to make a story like this work. It's not a terrible movie, but it's not great either. I felt pretty underwhelmed by it. It's something to watch if there's nothing else on, but I wouldn't go hunting for it. And that pretty much sums it up. I'd like to thank you for sharing your time with me today, and I hope you enjoyed this review of Surrogates. Stay tuned for more reviews to come. Take care.